This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Economics. Everyone has questions about their farm. From general inquiries to in-depth fertilizer questions, find straightforward answers at nutrien-economics.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. It's Friday, and as I mentioned yesterday, Old Man Winter is definitely here. Yikes. Seeing some of the pictures on social media, not very good at all. Of course, Eastern Canada dealing with wet weather, which is not being very convenient for some of the harvesting that still has to happen as well. Well, it's Friday, which means it's the RealAg Issues Panel. Lindsay Smith is out today. That's okay. Day off. She very much deserves it. We'll be joined today by Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, as well as John Barlow, who has been on the show before. Now, John is a Conservative MP from Foothills in Alberta. He is also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food for the Conservatives. And we got a number of different issues to talk about. We got the St. Lawrence Seaway strike. We've got the shenanigans in the Senate when it comes to Bill C-234. Where is Minister McCauley's mandate letter? All that and a whole lot more. And then we'll finish off the show, just Kelvin and I kind of wrapping up what happened here in the week that was. And a week that what it was indeed. So if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. When we get to the panelists, we're going to hear their predictions as well on the World Series, which begins tonight. Yes, D-backs, Diamondbacks versus the Texas Rangers. And I think it's going to be a great World Series. The mainstream media is poo-pooing it, and who cares? You know, like I said, I think earlier this week, Fox, all they want, and ESPN, all they want is Dodgers Cubs every single year. If we could just have, or Yankees Dodgers, it's ridiculous. And so these are two really good teams. Texas brings the power, a lot of big free agent signings, and the D-backs are all about youth. And they like to run the bases. It's going to be really, really good. And there's going to be a lot of players that you kind of lost track of, or you didn't even know existed. And I think it's going to be a great World Series. Two teams that 2 years ago, the D-backs 2 years ago lost 110 games. 110. I think the Texas Rangers were like 94 one year, and they lost 92 the other. 2 years ago, both these teams were terrible. Here they are. So it shows if you're committed to a plan, and you can make it work and execute, you can definitely co-rebound. Good business lesson there, I think, indeed. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, I forgot to mention, we have Anne Wasko with us here today, too. The beef market update. That's right. And we'll do that right after this. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Your co-op grow team are your local experts, because we live here, too. Our agronomic specialists stay up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire farm operation. Talk to our team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. We have recommendations to help you optimize your crop yield and quality while enhancing the health of your land. Co-op. We're all growing together. Here for your farm. Here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the beef market update with Anne Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are you doing on this Friday?
I am good today, Shaun. Thank you.
Super curious. Do you have your Halloween costume picked out for next week?
Maybe a rancher.
Yeah, exactly. I have a really funny story about something like that I will not tell on the air here today. Let's move on to the beef market update. Okay, last Friday, we got to start here, I think. We had the USDA cattle on feed report. And the cattle on feed report, when I've complained to you about this in the past, when we compare it to some of the reports that we get on the cropping side, where there tends to be a lot more surprises and debate, the cattle on feed report tends to be a little bit, here's the expectations and here's the number. That did not happen on Friday. Give us your analysis.
Yeah, for sure. So last Friday was the U.S. October 1 cattle on feed report. And of course, pre-report guesses come out and the trade kind of gets itself in that mode. And then when the report comes out, as you say, typically there's not a lot of change, although historically, Shaun, when I go back to my good old days, there used to be. But for this report that we're talking about, September placements were up 6% versus last year. They're up 4% versus the 5-year average. And the pre-report guess that was in the market to the trade was expecting was up 2%. So when you get that kind of number, especially in September, futures, obviously collapsed Monday morning and Tuesday morning. So we've seen a real tough week on futures. For example, going back to pre-report December live cattle futures last Thursday were kind of opened at 187. Last night they closed at 179. February last Thursday was 190. Last night it was 180. April last week was 194. Last night it was 183. So that's the kind of hit that happened in a very short period of time. Here at the end of this week, markets have stabilized, but certainly, at those lower levels. So it is what it is. I guess one thing I'd say right off the top is placing more now shuffles your time frame around. And so that's what futures are trying to figure out. Okay, more cattle placed earlier, logistically will mean, mathematically will mean less cattle later. So those kinds of things. But until we actually start to see those smaller numbers placed, the markets are going to be on the defensive. And so that's kind of what's changed for now. And until we get some different news, markets are going to be in this train of thought. And, Dee, do you want to talk right now about Alberta's report from the previous week?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, because there's some similarities.
Yeah, so, and I had actually mentioned to some U.S. Analysts last week, well, this is what, before this report came out, this is what happened here in Western Canada, and it would, if we had a futures market, I'm sure it would have been surprised as well, but we had a Western Canadian, our October 1 report was out the previous Friday, and it was up 4% for on feed. So again, we keep talking about these smaller numbers, but we've got 4% more cattle on feed than a year ago, and the September placements were up 2%. Now, you might not think that's a big number, Shaun, but you and I have been talking on this show since June. Because of the drought here in Western Canada, we've had placements up in June, July, August, and now September was above a year ago as well. So those 4 months now, when you total them up, in Western Canada, our placements for those 4 months are now up 23% from last year. And barring the drought year of 21, this is the biggest 4-month placement we've ever had in Western Canada since 2009. So similar kind of story. A lot of cattle going on feed. Record prices are drawing them out. Drought conditions are forcing them out. I mean, those would be the top two reasons, I think, on both sides of the border as to what we've seen going on.
Do those increased placements match the packing capacity when all this comes to market, or what's your thoughts?
Well, again, that's a bit of a variation in terms, I think from a capacity perspective, the answer could be yes, we'll be okay. But the more the question then becomes demand, right? And so packers are going to more schedule their their kill schedules for what the demand is, not what necessarily what there is for cattle out there. And so that's I think more what the focus will be as we go forward through the winter and into 2024. How is beef demand holding up in North America in terms of these record high retail prices and what's going on in the other protein markets? So I think that's a bigger question that we still don't have answered. We'll get through it. The question will always be at what price, right?
Yeah, exactly. And all of this has not, as you indicated, has not been very friendly to the futures market. I'm just looking at Dees live cattle, and we've taken $5 off that December live cattle future. The last month we've taken, which is prior to the report, but we've taken about $8.50 off. I guess you add all this together for people that are holding inventory. How should they be looking at this market going forward?
Well, I think short term, that's why we, risk management, price risk management is I think a pretty important piece of the puzzle in terms of especially a cattle feeder on either side of the border. And so all through this, as a feeder's been procuring cattle, you would hope to assume that they've been managing risk accordingly. And the bigger picture in terms of cow-calf producers that have got maybe a bigger time frame in terms of inventory. Again, as I said earlier, I think placing more now means less later. And so the storyline still is smaller numbers ahead in 2024. It's just that we've bunched a lot of them up through the winter of 23-24.
For Canadian feeders, one positive maybe this week is the fact the Canadian dollar has shown some real bearish tones as we're down to just above 72 cents. I've seen a few people predicting closer, we're headed towards closer to 70. That's good for people that are exporting.
Yeah, for sure. So again, if you're managing your risk in Canada, that's part of your equation as you go through live cattle futures and basis in the Canadian dollar. That's you'll be working that into your net results at the end of the day. Exactly.
But that U.S. corn is a little bit more expensive. There's two ways to that.
Hopefully you've got that taken care of as well. That when markets are this volatile and this reactive, especially when then the next layer outside of that, Shaun, is the geopolitical and global events that are going on outside of cattle markets. Yeah. There's just lots of volatility that we're dealing with, whether you're talking about exchange rates, cattle prices, corn prices, you name it.
And what's interesting though, we got to, we're comparing some of these prices in the last week, the placement number compared to a year ago. If you look at December live cattle, though, historically, the price today versus the 5-year average at this time, we're still a good $40 above the 5-year average.
Yeah,
so
record prices are still prevailing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, quickly, how about the cow slaughter and prices?
Well, here we are near end of October, heading into November, and that's typically one of the lowest price markets for a slaughter cow of the year, kind of November or January, depending on the year. But last week, Canfax reported the D2 cow price in Alberta at $135 for a provincial average, and that would be a record high for October, in terms of where we've been sitting. Last record previous to this for October was $125 back in 2014. And then just comparing to last year, it was 104. So, still, even though we're off the records from this summer, for this time of year, these are still very strong cow prices. Cow slaughter is still up. Year to date in Canada, we're running up 8%. And that's basically what we've been doing really since the start of this year. It's been solidly above a year ago as the drought continued to send more cows to town.
Well, Anne, thanks so much for the update. Have yourself a great weekend. This is, I know, a very, very busy time as old man winter has hit the prairies, and different. I'm hearing anecdotes of people talking about a foot of snow in different parts. This is where ranchers there's a lot of work to be done before real winter hits, I guess.
Yeah, this is a busy time on the ranch. And then obviously if it's busy here and we're selling calves here, it's busy at the feedlots as well. Yeah, busy time. Yeah,
auction marts have definitely been busy here through the fall, as you've been talking about. Okay, and thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, have a good one, Shaun.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with the RealAg Issues Panel, Kelvin Heppner, and also conservative ag critic, or the shadow minister, I should say, John Barlow will be with us. So we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
You know, there's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup, weed control, field trial results, yield strategies, and so much more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF, Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest podcast today.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday for the RealAg Issues Panel. We have got a long list to talk about, but first I want to mention your co-op grow team stays up to date with the latest research and technology to help support your entire operation. Talk to their team for advice tailored to your farm's needs. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Okay, let's jump in here to get the panel introduced, and we'll jump into the topics. Up first, Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are you?
Doing well. Good to be here. Last week we were working outside in a t-shirt, and today we spent a good part of the day clearing snow and trying to pack it down so that we can move around the yard again.
Old man winter.
Here quickly. Yep.
How much snow you got on the ground?
In the yard, I'd say a good foot. Field maybe not quite as much, but yeah, there's some wet, heavy snow. A good blanket out there.
It's jarring. Is that a good way to put the change?
Just how quickly it flipped is jarring, and I don't mind the quick transition because fall can be messy if it just drags out and it's just wet and cold and damp, and the quick change to winter isn't bad. But yeah, we were doing field work not long ago. There were people still in the field 2 days ago, and we're now into what feels like winter mode here.
Yeah. For anybody that says, I love winter, you're lying to yourself and everybody around you. Okay. Also joining us here today is John Barlow. He is Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. He is from the riding of Foothills. John, great to have you here.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you having me on, and looking forward to a pretty good discussion this morning for sure.
Yeah, busy weekend in Ottawa. Like, things
Very
are
much
happening.
so. Yeah, it's, for agriculture, we kind of expect to ease into the fall and into winter. Up here anyway, I know everybody's busy in the fields, but it's been a pretty hectic schedule so far, and lots of things going on. Some not so good, others maybe not too bad, but yeah, it's been a pretty packed schedule so far.
Now, Kelvin, last week we had Cody Blois from MP for the Liberal Party, as chair of the House Ag Committee. He was on the show. And we were talking about hockey and playing hockey, and Cody had a question for John. We need to press John on this.
Well, for those listening, both Cody and John, I believe, are goaltenders, hockey goaltenders, and we asked Cody last week whether he was planning on putting on the pads at all this winter, and in his answer, I don't think we even prompted him to say this, but he indicated that he would be interested in joining the weekly Conservative Caucus hockey game that I believe it's weekly when you're in Ottawa, John. What would it take to have a Liberal MP? He is your Ag Committee colleague. What would it take to have him join you at Conservative Hockey Night?
Yeah, Cody has been nagging me quite a bit to come out on our Wednesday night shinnies, which has been fantastic. There's really one way that Cody can get in the door, and that's crossing the floor. That's the only way he's getting in that dressing room. If he crosses the floor, he's more than welcome to join the Conservative hockey. But as long as he's wearing the red jersey, it's not going to happen.
I can see him. Go ahead, Kelvin.
Isn't there some precedent in his riding?
If he pulls a Scott Bryson the opposite direction, and if he corrects Scott Bryson's mistake and comes back to the Conservatives, King's Hands will be very well represented in the Conservative caucus and on the ice.
But fill us in, John. Who's a better goalie, you or Cody?
Well, Cody's younger substantially, but I think I could go toe to toe with Cody if I had to. And I've never seen him play, but well, I know there's some talk about maybe getting the Liberal Conservative game going again. There's been a few Liberals that have been asking to renew that rivalry, so maybe we'll have a chance to put the skills to the test.
Yeah, we referred to it last week in the U.S. Congress has a Republicans versus Democrat baseball game at the Washington Nationals field. So there's those kind of things that do happen, and I think it's good. Obviously, not on the same page from a political sense, but it builds some camaraderie, and I think there's a longer tail of people getting to know each other too. So in these kind of more heavily sort of tribal partisan times. Okay, let's jump to it, John. I want to hit on the Seaway strike first. Now, both sides, as of recording here today's show, they are supposed to be meeting in Toronto today. We've talked to Brendan Burney from the Grain Farmers of Ontario. We're talking about $20 million a day. 40% of the volume that goes through the Seaway is agriculture related and imports and exports. This is something that needs to find, I guess, a conclusion, a path to resolution. I guess the question is how. From your perspective, what do you think should be pushed for?
Yeah, certainly with the importance of that Seaway and what we went through last summer with the Port of Vancouver strike, I think it highlights the fragility of Canada's supply chain and how much we rely on only a handful of ports and access to tidewater. So this needs to get resolved as quickly as possible. And we're certainly, Chris Lewis, who is our labor critic for the Conservatives, is working quite closely with both sides, and certainly been on regular contact with Chris and expressing the concerns that have been raised with our agriculture stakeholders, certainly with fertilizer, corn and bean harvest getting wrapped up. We need this to be resolved as quickly as possible. Hopefully the two sides can come to an agreement. Everything I've been hearing from Chris is that it sounds like this shouldn't be a prolonged strike, but without being at the table, it's really tough to tell.
Kelvin, the Globe and Mail had a story about this today. I was reading, and Wade Sobkowicz, director of the Western Grain Elevator Association, who we've definitely talked to quite a few times, he was talking about how the industry is still recovering from the BC floods, some of the other strikes that have happened from the Vancouver terminal. He was quoted as saying that we're already seen as something of a banana republic, which that's quite a statement. When it comes to allowing companies to fulfill contracts without having to overcome artificial disruptions, this just adds to that. There's a lot of concern here about how this makes it, and actually the CEO of the Seaway made that sort of concern about how our brand is being tarnished as a reliable exporter with all these labor disruptions.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment, especially in agriculture where we're so reliant on exports and trade and having those relationships with export customers. Every time something like this happens, and it seems like lately it's happening more often, where labor unions are exerting more pressure on employers. It seems to be a trend right now. And so, yeah, it's certainly something that customers of Canadian products have to take that into consideration when they sign contracts with Canadian suppliers, and that can be to our detriment here in terms of being a preferred supplier of crops and other things around the world.
Now, do either of you know where we're at with the fact that this is grain? It should move even with the work stoppage. Has there been are we any closer to a resolution on that? No?
I can jump in, or I haven't seen, there was supposed to be a labor ruling on that this week. I haven't seen the ruling. It only applies to licensed terminals, and it's a lot, I at least find when it comes to Canadian Grain Commission and Canada Grain Act Authority, in Western Canada, it basically applies everywhere. When you get into the eastern corridors, it's the authority of the Grain Commission it's not as consistent, and so I'm not sure. It'll depend on these terminals, which ones are licensed and which ones aren't, and of course waiting for this labor ruling that I don't know if it's been handed down yet. John might have more.
No, you've articulated that quite well, Kelvin. I think that's exactly the position we're in right now.
John, we've been covering Bill C-234 extensively this week. Kelvin's done some great work here capturing what's been happening between the Senate and the Senate Ag Committee, and farm groups now pushing hard against or trying to encourage senators to turn down those amendments from the committee. Yesterday, though, we saw the Prime Minister basically give a 3-year exemption on the carbon tax for heating oil. This is a big deal in the Maritimes. Why is 234 having so much trouble when we're giving a 3-year waiver for people that are having to heat their homes with heating oil? It seems like there's a lot of mixed messages on the carbon tax right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Certainly, we were extremely frustrated with what happened in the Senate Agriculture Committee to add that amendment, which really puts 234 in serious jeopardy of actually getting passed. And the arguments we were hearing from Liberal-appointed senators was, well, this is about the Conservatives trying to axe the tax. It's critical that we have the carbon tax as a pillar of our pricing on pollution policy and legislation. And then to see that announcement yesterday, I was like, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too here. You're picking winners and losers. Last week, your senators were going on and on about how important the price on pollution is, and we have to get people to change their habits. But then you just made a substantial walk back on this for Atlantic Canadians, where you're not making the same the same position with farming when food and inflation and all of these things are top of mind for Canadians. So my argument today in the House of Commons was, why are you, the desperate pleas from Canadian farmers that are going to be, spending close to $1 billion in carbon taxes on natural gas and propane by 2030. That doesn't seem to get your attention, but plummeting polls in Atlantic Canada sure got you to act pretty fast. So the hypocrisy of this is beyond frustrating.
Yeah, Kelvin?
Yeah, exactly. That announcement yesterday was quite the about face by the government, and this was seen in many ways as almost a legacy item of this government having the price on pollution, and it was a holy grail, untouchable, and that got shattered. Yes, that whole idea got shattered yesterday with that announcement that they are removing the carbon tax from heating oil for the next 3 years at least. And so, like John said, the polls are certainly dictating some actions here. We have seen those Atlantic Canadian MPs in the Liberal caucus speaking out against the carbon tax, or at least asking for adjustments to it, including Cody Blois, who we had on the panel last week. And certainly Cody was front and center in the announcement yesterday, along with Agriculture Minister Lawrence McCauley from PEI, MPs that are there looking at fighting for their seats right now. And so this shows again that politics can trump politics can trump, or the polls can trump policy ideas. So sorry, I have an interruption here.
Breaking news.
Yeah.
And
so, yeah, I do wonder whether this makes it easier for senators in terms of tying the last two questions together here, Shaun. C-234 is up for a vote in the Senate potentially this coming week, and it might make it easier for senators to vote against it based on the Holy Grail being shattered here. They don't need to defend that carbon tax until the nth degree, or at least that could be a signal that could have been received after the announcement yesterday.
John, you mentioned Liberal senators. I thought the Senate was supposed to be independent. Some of the senators have not acted as such, though.
No, they're appointed by the Prime Minister, and I think the stats speak for themselves. 96% or 98% is very high. They vote with the government. And when we were watching the debate in the committee, and you had the deputy leader of the Independent Senate and the leader of the Independent Senate, who are Trudeau appointees, come to that committee who are not normally there, you could kind of tell that this was the fix was in, so to speak, that they were going to they needed an amendment in there to try and kill this bill, and they were unfortunately successful in doing that. As Kelvin said, we have one more chance at the Senate at the report stage, hopefully on Tuesday, where, and I agree with Kelvin, I think this gives those senators who are maybe a bit, waffling on which way to go, and are they going to defend this pillar of the Trudeau legacy, which is the pricing on pollution, the carbon tax, whereas the Prime Minister has just axed his own tax. So yeah. I think that gives them an opportunity to say, well, okay, obviously we've now decided that the carbon tax is not affordable, and there are areas where we believe that it can be exempted to help the greater good. So I'm hoping this gives them a reason to rethink their position and vote this down at the report stage, and it would come back to the House in its original form, and that gives us a much better chance to get this going.
Yeah, it shouldn't be lost on anybody that, like yesterday's announcement on the heating oil is sort of like, hey, we're here to solve a problem that actually we created. Like, right. We're not fixing something. We're not here. We're not solutions oriented. We actually created this problem in the first place. So shouldn't be lost on anybody. Okay, we've got Kelvin Heppner, John Barlow, and we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio right after this.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
What were the issues in your fields this year? Did you do a soil sample? What is your soil sample telling you about some of the nutrient issues that you might be having going into next year? What herbicides did you use? What residues you might be concerned about? What weed issues did you have? What crop residues did you have? How well do you know your fields?
Get the answers to all the questions you have about your pulse crop at the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, here for the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture. Joining us as well is John Barlow, MP from Foothills, Alberta, or the riding of Foothills in Alberta. He is also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture for the Conservative Party of Canada. Kelvin, you and I joke all the time about how I a lot of times bring the opinion and you bring the facts. You love facts, don't you?
I do enjoy facts, yes.
Everybody, that's the uncomfortable laugh that Kelvin gives me when he's like, where are you going with this? Well, I'll tell you where I'm going with it, Kelvin. This segment is brought to you by Ag Expert Software. It is software for field and finance. It's not a hunch when it's backed by facts. Be like Kelvin. You got to back stuff with facts. Uncover your facts at agexpert.ca/farmwithfacts. There you go. Nice stuff. Okay, let's jump in, gang, here to the details on the AgriRecovery rollout. John, I'm going to ask you really simply, what we've been hearing from the provinces sort of behind the scenes and different stakeholders, the provinces should feel pretty shortchanged here based on what the requests were and what the feds gave them in terms of dollars. Is that what you've been hearing, and why?
Yeah, certainly. That's exactly what we've been hearing in my conversations with some of the provincial agriculture ministers who are, first off, very frustrated with how long this took to get rolled out. This is supposed to be a demand-driven legislation that should be available as soon as municipalities and provinces trigger it. So for this to be, well into October and now just coming to an agreement is frustrating. But certainly, from what I've heard in my discussions with those ministers, is what was initially agreed to early on in the fall, late summer, is very different from what the federal government has now rolled out is going to be available. So it is significantly less than what it was hoped for, and some interesting, I guess, criteria, we'll say, from what I've heard from the ministers, is that how you will access these programs is also different than what they were expected.
Kelvin?
Yeah, when we've seen Saskatchewan this week actually roll out the application forms and criteria for applying, and just using Saskatchewan's math, the province announced $70 million for AgriRecovery back in August, And so AgriRecovery is on a 60-40 cost share formula. So using that formula, then the federal component should have been over $100 million. And instead, the feds last week announced $77 million. So that's much closer to a 50-50 cost share arrangement than a 60-40. And so that's just an example of how far out this is. I think in general, right now, the federal government there's a lot of pressure right now to find savings and to reduce spending, to increase revenues. And that's been one of the arguments, at least we've heard behind the scenes, regarding the C234 changes and why the Liberals are putting up such a fight to block C234 from going through, because of that up to $1 billion in lost foregone revenue in carbon taxes collected from farmers over the next 8 years. Well, here's another example of potentially some effort to find savings. Maybe the federal government, maybe that was a factor in why they didn't come forward with meeting the requests of the provinces in Saskatchewan and Alberta for AgriRecovery for helping livestock producers affected by the drought this year.
Yeah, it reminds me of, remember in that cartoon Robin Hood, taxes, taxes, taxes. They're all of a sudden we're a little bit worried about that budget not balancing itself, Kelvin. This is quite interesting and ironic.
And there's scrutiny not applied based on actual ability to find there's scrutiny being applied to everything, including the things that are just a drop in the bucket, not the big spending items necessarily. So that's where it can be frustrating, because if we're nickel and diming little programs in the big picture, then that same lens isn't necessarily applied to big things, then that can be quite frustrating.
John, you're the shadow. Oh, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, just the government did say, to Kelvin's point, where they had to find $15 billion in savings over the next 4 or 5 years. And I agree with Kelvin, where if you've got a $45 billion deficit and you're asking to find 15 over the next 4 or 5 years, programs like this, it's about setting priorities. And programs like this that ensure our farmers can remain whole, but also that we are ensuring that food remains affordable, that we actually have products to sell. I think this is just a misappropriation of where your priorities should be. And this is an agreement between the provinces and federal government, and for the feds to make this decision to shortchange the provinces on such a critical industry, I just think is really short-sighted. And again, when we talk about 234 and the difference between the home heating oil in Atlantic Canada, it just shows where agriculture stands on the priority list for this government right now.
Now, one of the people that was standing behind the Prime Minister yesterday applauding the change was, as Kelvin mentioned, Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Lawrence MacAulay, still without a mandate letter. And so are all of the ministers. I guess, John, and you're not obviously inside the Liberal caucus, where are the mandate letters? And as the shadow minister, what are you working off of? The last one? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have had an opportunity to meet with Minister MacAulay and kind of give him our list of priorities and the things that we hope that they will be focusing on. And I will be upfront. I wasn't impressed with the fire in the belly, let's say, that he was going to go get down to work and start addressing some of these problems. It was a lot of that's the trade minister's issue, or that's the health minister's issue, or we really need somebody with everything that's going on right now, a strong voice at the cabinet table, and I'm hoping Minister MacAulay will be that person. But thus far, there's really been despite all the issues that we're facing, there really hasn't been a lot out of his office that's showing me that they are taking these things seriously and have a real plan on how to address some of the issues agriculture is facing. And I don't worry about the mandate letters of other ministers, so to speak, but I certainly worry about this one and the fact there seems to be a real lack of direction right now.
Kelvin, do you have a question about that?
No, I could maybe just have more of a comment, because when the shuffle happened, one of the messages that we received from the outgoing Ag Minister's office was that she had accomplished her mandate letter. She had checked everything off, and so it was time to move on to a new challenge. And here we have the cabinet ministers. I know Minister Bill Blair said that he's basically still working off of the previous mandate letter at this time. So just mixed messages, like you said.
Yeah, unfortunately. John, wanted to get an update on your trespassing private members bill. Where are we at with that?
Well, it's gone through committee successfully, so now it will come back to the House to start third reading debate on Tuesday. So we're hopeful that we'll get it through the House in third reading and then on to the Senate. Really positive feedback from Canadian producers and stakeholders, processors to get this moving on. Obviously, some opposition from the animal activists out there, but we're really trying to again keep all party support with this. We'll see if the NDP remain on board. They voted against it at committee, but it still passed as a result of having support of the majority of the Liberals on committee. So we're still optimistic that we can get this through third reading and onto the Senate, but there's still some work to do.
Yeah. Also, we heard, as we mentioned, we had Cody Blois on the show last week. He was talking about his new private members bill. Are you supporting that bill, John?
Yeah, I think it's a good bill from what Cody brought forward. I think it's something that we would all support in terms of harmonization of regulations. We want to see some of these critical products come to market in Canada, and we hear incessantly that they don't look at Canada as a viable market because of the red tape and the time that it takes to get approvals and permits and those types of things in Canada. But we're a smaller market. We have to make it as smooth as possible for investment to come to Canada. So I like what Cody's brought. I guess my frustration with Cody's bill is that why is the government picking this up? It makes sense. I think it will have strong support within the House of Commons. And I know Cody, if you've talked to him about this already, is going to push the government to pick this up and have this as a government bill. Not convinced, again, as we've been talking about where agriculture stands as a priority with this government, that will be successful from Cody's part. But I think for us, it is something that anytime we can reduce red tape and reduce the gatekeepers, it's something that we'd be supportive of.
This is something that Mr. McCauley should be behind. That's actually a really good point. It's a Liberal government, and Cody's a Liberal MP. Is it common that we would have a private members bill like from within the party that is currently governing? Is that common? I don't know. Kelvin, John?
Well, let's take a look at over the last 8 years, and you guys have been following this just as closely as anyone. Can you really name me a bill or piece of legislation from this government that has had a focus on agriculture at all? The only one that's really going through right now, again, is another private members bill that's from the previous mandate letter, is to ban the live transportation of horses, or the transportation of live horses to Japan, right? That's the only one that's kind of come from the mandate letter. But I can't think of one off the top of my head of a government bill that's come through this government focused on agriculture.
Okay,
C49, the transportation bill.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Mark Garneau, transportation minister. Kelvin,
that wasn't directly through the agriculture minister's office.
No,
we've been working together too long.
And that's a while ago already, now that you raise that point. To me, it does make sense. Like, why isn't McCauley behind this bill? It's the government there has this scrutiny right now on spending and cutting, and also on reducing food prices. And the whole food chain is really in focus right now. Why not look at reducing the red tape and and getting products into technology into the Canadian market faster? To me, it could address both of those issues that are at the forefront right now.
John, you got to go after the end of this segment, but wanted to ask, I'm going to hit Kelvin with this later, but you got D-backs or Rangers in the World Series?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm very surprised with both those teams being there. Maybe not Texas so much, the power and the pitching that they've had. I really thought Philadelphia was their year. I compared them to the early '90 Phillies when they were playing the Jays in the '93 World Series. Just the dirt bags, I think they were called. They just seem to have that great unity.
John
Kruk and Dalton and Nails in the center field. So, but I just have this feeling that the Texas has never. Have they won a World Series? I just think it's their due. No, they've got to win this thing sooner.
They've been there. This will be the third time they've been there, I think. Could have that wrong. Someone's going to correct me, but
yeah. So I'm going to go with Texas. I just think they're due. It's their time.
Barlow's in for Texas. Okay. Hey, John, thanks a lot for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. All the best to you, and we'll chat with you again soon, okay?
It's my pleasure. Anytime, fellas. You guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Thanks,
we'll be right back on RealAg Radio. Kelvin and I will wrap up the week right after this.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. Okay, it's just Kelvin and I left. I guess Kelvin will get to wrap up the week. This is going to be a lot of fun. There's a few stories we've got to get to that we weren't able to during the panel discussion there. I guess first we should talk about the Bank of Canada this week. Paused on rates. It's going to be a popular decision from the consumer standpoint, but definitely some of the messaging from Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, we're not out of the woods yet when it comes to potential rate hikes going forward.
Yeah, was it last month that we called it a hawkish pause? I think.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Still in the same category because he's still talking about there's still a good chance of another rate hike before we really have inflation back where we want it here. So we're headed in the right direction because he actually admitted this week that they're now expecting inflation to only get back within that 2% range by 2025. So that means rates will have to stay higher longer than what most people were probably hoping. And so, in 2025 is still 2 years out, of course. And so here we go. Inflation they're forecasting down to around 3.5% in the summer of 2024. And so potentially another hike though. And and expecting the U.S., the Federal Reserve to hold rates also next week when they announce their decision. So,
yeah, but tough week in the markets. Friday was a little bit more positive, especially on the soybean side. We had Chip Flory on the show earlier this week, and I thought it was kind of nice because it has been really hard. The audience has been like, why do you get all these bearish people on? They just say the market's going down because right now that is the very, very popular opinion. And it was nice to hear Chip talk a little bit about, okay, maybe we're trying to find a bottom here. There's actually some more positive things happening fundamentally that the market's not responding to. I thought it was good to get sort of like a fresher perspective on where we could be at. I hope he's right.
Yeah, I think everybody who's wishing they had sold more back in summer or even back last winter and spring is hoping that he's right, that we are close to finding a bottom here. Surely at some point these prices have to bring some demand back into the picture, and markets will correct themselves that way. But there's also the whole idea of everybody standing on the same side of the boat. It's time to go to the other side, kind of thing. And lately, it does feel like that when we hear from all these market analysts every week on the bearish side of things. It would be if everybody thinks it's headed in one direction, it's probably already turned around and headed the other. But I don't know if we've reached that point yet.
Yeah. I saw a story in Barron's earlier this week talking about the Cybertruck. And I wouldn't say a lot of the audience is super excited about the Cybertruck. I know a few people that have ordered, put their name on the list. Now, Tesla had some comments this week, not very encouraging for the Cybertruck. First of all, it looks terrible. And they didn't say that, but let's be honest. It looks awful. But Elon Musk and management went out of their way to manage investor expectations around the closely watched Cybertruck launch, citing the difficulty of the ramp into 2024 and the negative impact the truck could have on margins and cash flow over the next 18 months. not sounding good for a company that is pulling back some of its production in Mexico because of some of the concern. EVs have kind of slowed down, it seems. There's a lot of concern out there based on not the uptake. It's been positive, but it hasn't been as strong as maybe some people had forecasted.
Yeah, there's that curve. What's it called? The Gardner hype curve or something like that. When for new products, when they come on, we saw this drones go through this, for example, in agriculture, where things go up and then it looks like they're headed to the moon, and then all of a sudden they plateau and go down, and there's a bit of a correction that has to happen in terms of adoption and people investing or putting their hard-earned dollars into this technology. And it feels like EVs are in that lull phase right now, where governments, we saw the UK a few weeks ago back off on its EV mandates, and surely the announcement from Prime Minister Trudeau yesterday regarding the carbon tax on heating oil is kind of something along the same lines, where all of a sudden that 2035 EV mandate here in Canada is going to look unrealistic unless there's major upgrades to the grid and all these other things that need to happen, all these other balls that need to fall in the right place for that to actually come to fruition. And so, yeah, EVs, if the government policy side of things driving a lot of that demand is probably backed off. And then, of course, you have politics and partisanship and the tribal nature of our world today. Elon Musk himself being such a polarizing figure, I wonder how that affects sales of Tesla's vehicles and people that aren't fans of him looking at other brands instead or not buying a Tesla. So, yeah, there's lots of things to consider, but it does feel like in general, EVs are going through a bit of a reality check right now.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal had a story about how one of the things that EV companies are sort of seeing or concerned about is very similar to the plant protein situation, where it's like it's falling into political default. So people on the left buy EVs, people on the right don't. And when I think of like an electric truck, in order for the Cybertruck as an example, and there is other competitors too. Rivian is, I think, the company that also has a truck. When I think about an electric truck, you got to compete with the Ford F-150. That's not happening in urban centers to the same extent as happening on the rural side of the countryside in Canada and the U.S.
Oh, exactly. You look at the demographics and polling results, if you could poll based on truck ownership or not, I think it would lean to more one side of the spectrum of politics.
Jeez, that Cybertruck is ugly. I don't care what anybody says. If you think it's really cool looking, you're lying to yourself.
But it's bulletproof, apparently, right?
Because that's exactly what everybody needs, is a bulletproof electric truck.
That's the future. Yeah.
Hey, who you got, D-backs or Rangers?
I'm joining you on the Diamond. Oh, sorry, I'm going to give away your pick here. I'm joining you on the Diamondbacks bandwagon here, Shaun. Kind of the underdogs, and of course, there's some Blue Jays connections there with the catcher Moreno. Blue Jays shouldn't have traded him to the Diamondbacks last year or in the offseason. So him and Gurriel in the outfield, there's some Blue Jays connections there. So I think I'm rooting for the Diamondbacks, and I maybe a bit of an underdog. I know John Barlow had some good logic there as to why Texas could pull it off, but I'm on Team Arizona.
I'm telling you, there's some D-back young players that the national media has not covered. Pay attention to right field. Corbin Carroll is awesome. He is a rookie. He's going to win Rookie of the Year, and probably most baseball fans have not heard of him. He has had a fantastic year, and he is the real deal. And that Gabby Moreno, who the Blue Jays traded, he's batting in the 3-hole, everybody. So, take that, Blue Jay fans. Okay, Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend. Enjoy that snow. Get out the blower.
Thank you. Everyone else as well.
If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can always call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll, of course, chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of the RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Economics. With one-of-a-kind tools, research, and content, Economics is farming's go-to information resource. Find it all on nutrient-economics.com or download the app.